Captain Ross checked the navigation display one more time as the Meridian dropped out of hyperspace. The stars looked wrong. Where New Haven's bright sun should have been shining, there was only darkness. Where the orbital station should have been blinking with docking lights, there was nothing but empty space filled with twisted metal debris. "What the hell happened here?" whispered Tom, the ship's engineer, as he stared at the main screen. The entire New Haven system looked like someone had put it through a giant blender. Pieces of what used to be planets drifted past their ship like broken toys. Ross had been flying supply runs to New Haven for 8 years. He knew this system better than his own backyard. 3 planets, 2 space stations, and over 4 million. Colonists called this place home. Now there was nothing left but scrap metal and dust clouds. "Sir, I'm not picking up any life signs," reported Lisa from the communications station. Her voice shook as she ran scan after scan. Nothing. Not even emergency beacons. The Meridian was just a simple cargo ship. Ross and his 12 crew members were supposed to deliver medical supplies and pick up rare minerals. It was meant to be a routine 3-day trip. They had done this run dozens of times before. Colonists always welcomed them with hot meals. In stories about their latest discoveries in the asteroid fields, Captain called out Mike from the sensor station. "You need to see this. There's something big out there. Really big." Ross moved to Mike's station and looked at the readings. At first, he thought the sensors were broken. The object was showing up as larger than most space stations, but it was moving. Ships weren't supposed to be that big. Nothing in the galaxy was supposed to be that big. "Can you get a visual on it?" Ross asked. Mike worked his controls, and the main screen shifted to show the edge of the system. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go quiet. A massive shape moved between the stars, so large it blocked out entire sections of space. Its surface looked like it was made of dark metal and flesh combined together. Strange lights pulsed across its hull like a heartbeat. "My God," whispered Tom. "It's eating the debris. Look at those appendages." Ross watched in horror, as long tentacle-like. Arms stretched out from the massive ship, gathering up chunks of destroyed planets and pulling them into openings along its sides. Whatever this thing was, it was feeding on the remains of New Haven. "We need to get out of here right now," Ross said, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. He cleared his throat and spoke louder. "Tom, fire up the hyperspace engines." "Lisa, send out a distress signal on all frequencies." "What should I tell them?" Lisa asked, her fingers already working on the communications panel. Ross stared at the massive ship as it continued to consume everything in its path. He had no idea what it was or where it came from. All he knew was that 4 million people were dead, and this thing was responsible. "Tell them New Haven is gone. Tell them we found something that eats entire star systems. Tell them humanity needs help." The distress signal went out as the Meridian's engines powered up for the jump to hyperspace. But before they could escape, the massive ship seemed to notice them. A section of its hull opened up, and smaller ships began pouring out. These smaller vessels were still larger than most human warships, and they moved with purpose toward the Meridian. "They're coming after us," Mike reported. "Multiple contacts, closing fast." "How fast can we jump?" Ross asked Tom. 2 minutes for full power," Tom replied, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked the engine controls. "We don't have 2 minutes," Lisa said, watching the approaching ships on her screen. "They'll be on us in 60 seconds. Ross made a decision. That would save his crew but haunt him for the rest of his life. Emergency jump. Half power. Do it now. Tom's hands flew over his controls. "Sir, a half-power jump could tear the ship apart." "We might not make it. We definitely won't make it if we stay here," Ross replied. "Do it." The Meridian lurched into hyperspace just as the first enemy ship reached their position. Jump threw everyone against the bulkheads, and sparks flew from damaged control panels. But they had escaped. As they traveled through hyperspace toward Earth, Ross kept thinking about what they had seen. The massive ship didn't look like any technology he had ever encountered. It moved like it was alive, but it was clearly artificial, and the way it had consumed the debris from New Haven suggested it could do the same thing to any star system in the galaxy. "Captain," Lisa said from her damaged communications station, "I'm receiving reports from other ships." That isn't an isolated incident. Similar attacks are being reported across the Outer Rim. Ross felt his blood turn cold. If there were more of these things out there, if they were attacking multiple systems at once, then this wasn't just a tragedy. This was an invasion. How many systems? He asked. Lisa worked her partially functioning equipment for several minutes before responding. At least 12 confirmed attacks in the last 6 hours, maybe more. The communication networks are breaking. Down as more systems go dark. Ross sat down in his captain's chair and tried to process what this meant. 12 systems. Millions of people, all gone in just 6 hours. And these creatures, whatever they were, showed no signs of slowing down. Send another message, he told Lisa. Tell Earth Command that we're facing something new. Something that can destroy entire star systems. Tell them we need every ship we can get, because I don't think these things are going to stop with the Outer Rim. The Meridian continued its journey toward Earth, carrying news that would change everything. Behind them, the massive ship finished consuming the last traces of New Haven and turned its attention toward the next star system. It had fed well here, and now it was ready to continue its ancient purpose of consuming everything in its path.
Ross
didn't know it yet, but his simple distress call would soon trigger the largest military mobilization in human history. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity's friends were threatened. The stars themselves would burn before. Humans allowed these creatures to continue their feast of destruction. Admiral Stone stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface, watching the holographic display of the galaxy as red warning lights spread like a disease across the star map. Each red dot represented a star system that had gone silent in the past day. The number had grown from 12 to 37, and more were disappearing every hour. Sir, we just lost contact with the Vorth colony at Rigel 7, reported Lieutenant Park from her station. That's the 18th system in the last 4 hours. Stone rubbed his tired eyes. He had been awake for 26 hours straight, ever, since Captain Ross's distress signal had reached Earth. The message had been simple but terrifying. Unknown hostiles were destroying entire star systems, consuming everything in their path. What's the status of the Galactic Defense Fleet? Stone asked. Not good, sir, Park replied, pulling up tactical displays. The Vorth lost half their fleet trying to defend their homeworld. The Lumari crystal ships are powerful, but these creatures seem to absorb energy attacks. The Keth are falling back to their core systems. Stone studied the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. Every major civilization was under attack, and their combined fleets were being destroyed faster than they could regroup. The enemy ships were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They were massive, apparently biological, and they could consume matter on a planetary scale. Sir, called out Communications Officer Davis. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting immediate military assistance. Stone almost laughed. The Galactic Council had barely tolerated humanity's presence in their organization. For 50 years, they had treated humans like newcomers who didn't understand the complexities of galactic politics. Now they were begging for help. Put them through, Stone said. The holographic display shifted to show Chancellor Vorthok, the insectoid leader of the Galactic Council. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and his compound eyes showed fear that Stone had never seen before. Admiral Stone, Vorthok said, his translator making his chittering speech understandable. We need your help. These devourers are unlike any threat we have faced in recorded history. They consume everything, planets, ships, even stars themselves. Do you need from us? Stone asked, though he already knew the answer. Everything you can spare, Vorthok replied. Your third fleet is the closest to the main attack zones. If you can buy us time to reorganize our defenses, we might be able to develop a strategy to fight these creatures. Stone looked at the tactical display showing the positions of human fleets. The third fleet was indeed closest to the attack zones, but it was also the smallest of humanity's fleets. Most human ships were designed for exploration and trade, not warfare. Against enemies that could destroy entire star systems, they would be like gnats attacking a dragon. I'll see what we can do, Stone said, and closed the connection. Lieutenant Park approached his station. Sir, with respect, the Third Fleet has only 47 ships. Most of them are converted cargo haulers and exploration vessels. Against enemies of this scale, they won't last 10 minutes. Stone nodded. Park was right, of course. By any reasonable military assessment, sending the Third Fleet against these devourers would be suicide. But Stone had read the reports from Captain Ross and the other survivors. These creatures weren't just destroying military targets. They were consuming everything. Colonies, civilian ships, entire populations. Send out Emergency Protocol 7 to all human vessels, Stone ordered. Every ship capable of mounting weapons is to converge on the Keth system, military, civilian, commercial. I don't care what they were designed for. If they can fly and fight, we need them. Park stared at him. Sir, that's going to be thousands of ships. Most of them are crewed by miners and traders who have never seen combat. Then they're about to get a crash course, Stone replied. Send the message. Tell them what we're facing. Tell them that every species in the galaxy is counting on us to buy them time. Tell them that if we don't stop these things here, they'll consume Earth next. The message went out across human space, and the response was immediate. Mining ships in the asteroid belts began mounting plasma cutters as weapons. Cargo haulers started loading missile pods in their holds. Even civilian passenger liners volunteered. To serve as medical ships or troop transports, Captain Ross, who had been debriefed and promoted to Commodore, was put in charge of organizing the civilian volunteers. He found himself in the strange position of turning space truckers and asteroid miners into a fighting force. Listen up. Ross addressed a gathering of civilian captains via holographic conference. I know most of you have never fired a shot. In anger, hell, most of your ships don't even have proper weapons. But we're not going up against a conventional enemy. It's devourers, or machines that eat entire star systems. Conventional tactics won't work anyway. A grizzled mining captain named Bill spoke up. So what's the plan, Commodore? Ram them with our cargo ships? If that's what it takes, Ross replied. And he meant it. These things consume matter, but they seem to have trouble with high-energy explosions. A ship's fusion reactor going critical might be enough to damage them. The civilian captains looked at each other nervously. They were being asked to turn their ships into bombs, to sacrifice their livelihoods, and possibly their lives for species they had never met. I won't lie to you, Ross continued. This is going to be dangerous. A lot of us aren't coming back. If we don't fight there, won't be anyone left to remember we existed. The devourers don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They just consume everything in their path. One by one, the civilian captains agreed to join the mission. Word spread through the commercial fleets, and volunteers began arriving at the staging areas. Within 12 hours, the largest human fleet in history was assembling near the Keth system. Admiral Stone watched the fleet reports with a mixture of pride and sadness. Over 3,000 ships had answered the call, but most of them were converted civilian vessels crewed by volunteers. Against an enemy that could destroy planets, they would be going into battle with mining equipment and cargo haulers. Lieutenant Park reported, "The fleet is ready to depart. Commodore Ross is asking for final orders." Stone looked at the holographic display one more time. The red zones were still spreading, and more systems were going dark every hour. The Keth homeworld was already under attack, and the surviving defenders were barely holding on. Tell Ross to show these devourers what humans do when our friends are in trouble, Stone said. Tell him to light up the galaxy if he has to. The human fleet departed for the Keth system, carrying with it the hopes of every species in the galaxy. They didn't know if they could win, but they knew they had to. Try. The alternative was the extinction of all life in the galaxy, and humans had never been good at accepting defeat. The Keth system was dying when the human fleet arrived. 2 of the system's 5 planets had already been consumed, leaving nothing but clouds of debris where thriving worlds once existed. The surviving Keth fleet, once proud and numerous, was reduced to less than 20 ships, desperately trying to protect their homeworld from 3 massive devourer ships. Commodore Ross stood on the bridge of his flagship, a hastily converted cargo hauler Defiance, and watched the apocalyptic scene. unfold on the main screen. The Devourers were even larger than the one he had encountered at New Haven. Each one was the size of a small moon, their biomechanical surfaces crawling, with millions of smaller creatures that seemed to be breaking down matter at the molecular level. "My God," whispered his new tactical officer, Lieutenant Bell. "How are we supposed to fight something like that?" Ross studied the tactical display showing the positions of the human fleet. 3,000 ships of every size and description had followed him into this system. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, exploration ships, and a handful of actual military vessels. Most of them were crewed by volunteers who had never seen combat before. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Martinez, "we're receiving a transmission from the Keith Defense Commander. She wants to coordinate our attack." "Put her through," Ross ordered. The main screen shifted to show Commander Rel, a tall amphibious being with the characteristic blue-green skin of the Keth. Her large eyes showed exhaustion and desperation, but also hope at the sight of the human fleet. "Commodore Ross," she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of her species. "We are grateful for your arrival, but I must warn you, conventional weapons are useless against these creatures. They absorb energy attacks and seem to feed on the matter from destroyed ships." "We figured that out," Ross replied. "We're not planning to fight them conventionally. What can you tell us about their behavior patterns?" Rel's expression grew grim. "They feed constantly. Those smaller creatures on their surface break down matter and transport it to internal processing centers. If we could disrupt that process, we might be able to cause internal damage." Ross nodded. It confirmed what he had suspected. The Devourers weren't just ships. They were living machines that consumed matter to grow and reproduce. Destroying them would require getting inside their feeding mechanisms. "Commander Rel," Ross said, "I need you to pull your remaining ships back to a safe distance. What we're about to do is going to be dangerous for anyone nearby." "What are you planning?" she asked. "We're going to feed these things something they can't digest," Ross replied. The human fleet spread out in a complex formation around the three Devourers. To the alien observers, it looked like suicide. Thousands of small ships approaching creatures that could swallow them whole. But Ross had a plan that was both brilliant and insane. "All ships, this is Commodore Ross," he broadcast to the entire fleet. "Remember what we discussed? Groups of 10 ships approach each Devourer. When you get within range, eject your cargo and set your fusion reactors to overload. The automated systems will handle the rest." Captain Bill, commanding a converted mining ship called Rockbreaker, was the first to lead his group toward the nearest Devourer. The massive creature's feeding appendages reached out toward them, mistaking the approaching ships for more food to be consumed. "This is crazy," Bill muttered to his crew. "We're flying directly into the mouth of a monster." "Crazy is what humans do best," replied his co-pilot, Anne. "Besides, my kids are on Earth. I'll fly into hell itself if it means keeping them safe." The Rockbreaker and 9 other ships flew directly into the Devourer's feeding mechanism. The creature's appendages wrapped around them, pulling them toward the processing centers on its surface. At the last moment, the ships ejected their cargo, not the usual ore and supplies, but specially modified fusion reactors set to overload. The explosions that followed lit up the system like a dozen new stars. The fusion reactors detonated inside the Devourer's processing centers, tearing through the creature's internal structure. The massive beast writhed in what could only be described as pain, its feeding appendages releasing their grip on the destroyed ships. But the human attack was just beginning. As the first Devourer reeled from the internal explosions, 2 more groups of ships approached the other creatures. The Devourers, now aware of the danger, tried to defend themselves. But their weapons were designed to destroy large targets, not small, fast-moving ships. Ross watched from the Defiance as group after group of human ships threw themselves into the Devourer's feeding mechanisms. Each attack cost them 10 ships and their crews, but the damage was accumulating. The creatures were having trouble processing the overloading fusion reactors, and their internal systems were beginning to break down. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Bell, "the first Devourer is showing signs of system failure. Its feeding appendages have stopped moving, and those surface creatures are starting to die off. Ross felt a moment of hope, but it was short-lived. Sensors showed that more were approaching from the outer system. The three they were fighting were just the advance guard. "All ships," Ross broadcast. "We've proven these things can be hurt. But we need to hit them harder and faster. Prepare for Phase 2. Phase 2 was even more desperate than Phase 1. Instead of approaching in small groups, entire squadrons of human ships began ramming directly into the Devourer's vital systems. Cargo haulers loaded with explosives crashed into the creature's control centers. Mining ships used their industrial lasers to cut through the biomechanical hull while their reactors overloaded. The converted passenger liner, Hope, was the largest ship in the fleet. Its captain, a woman named Carol, who had spent 30 years ferrying colonists to new worlds, made the ultimate sacrifice. She flew the Hope directly into the mouth of the largest Devourer, her ship's massive fusion core set to overload. "This is for all the people who will never see another sunrise," Carol broadcast as her ship disappeared into the creature's maw. The explosion that followed was visible from the other side of the system, tearing the massive Devourer apart from the inside. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships threw themselves at the Devourers with a fury that stunned both the enemy and their alien allies. Where other species had tried to fight conventionally and failed, humans turned their own ships into weapons. Every explosion was a declaration that some things were worth dying for. When the last Devourer in the system finally collapsed, its biomechanical structure failing under the damage caused by dozens of internal explosions, less than half the human fleet remained. But they had done the impossible. They had killed creatures that could devour entire star systems. Commander Rel approached the Defiance in her damaged flagship. "Commodore Ross," she said, her voice filled with awe, "what you have done here will be remembered for 1,000 generations. You have shown us that these creatures can be defeated." Ross looked at the debris field where so many brave humans had died. "The cost was too high," he said. "We lost over 1,500 ships and their crews." "But you saved billions of lives," Rel replied. "The Keth people will never forget this sacrifice. And now, we know how to fight back." As news of the victory spread across the galaxy, something extraordinary happened. The various species began working together as never before. The Lumari offered their crystal technology to amplify human weapons. Vorth provided bioengineering expertise to create better targeting systems. The Keth shared their quantum computers to calculate attack patterns, but more importantly, the galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when their friends were threatened. The sight of human ships throwing themselves into the mouths of planet-eating monsters, their crews shouting defiant battle cries as they died, became the stuff of legend. The Devourers had awakened something in humanity that they couldn't consume or understand: the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. And that willingness was about to change the course of the war. The news of humanity's victory at the Keth system spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications. Within hours, every species had heard the impossible story of how human cargo ships and mining vessels had destroyed creatures that could eat planets. The holographic recordings of human ships diving into the mouths of Devourers, their crews singing old Earth songs as they died, played on every news channel in the galaxy. Admiral Stone stood in the war room on Earth watching the tactical display as more reports came in. The victory at Keth had been costly but crucial. It proved the Devourers could be killed, but it also revealed just how many of them were out there. Deep space sensors were detecting hundreds of the massive creatures moving through the galaxy, consuming system after system. The Lieutenant Park reported, "We're receiving communications from across human space. Every colony, every mining station, every corporate headquarters is asking how they can help." Stone wasn't surprised. The footage from Keth had shown the galaxy what humans were willing to do for their friends. Now every human in the galaxy wanted to be part of the fight. But Stone knew that throwing more converted cargo ships at the Devourers wouldn't be enough. They needed a new strategy. "What's the status of the enemy advance?" Stone asked. They're moving toward the galactic core, Park replied. Intelligence suggests they're trying to reach the central black hole. If they succeed in consuming that much mass, they could destabilize the entire galaxy. Stone felt a chill run down his spine. The galactic core contained the supermassive black hole that held the entire galaxy together. If the Devourers consumed it, the gravitational effects would tear apart every star system in the galaxy. Billions of worlds would be destroyed not by the creatures themselves, but by the collapse of galactic structure. We need bigger weapons, Stone said. Much bigger. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Webb, a stellar physicist who had been studying the Devourer technology, approached Stone with a proposal that sounded like science fiction even by human standards. Admiral Webb said, spreading holographic displays across the war room table. We've analyzed the wreckage from Keth. These creatures feed on matter, but they're vulnerable to pure energy on a massive scale. What if we could turn stars themselves into weapons? Stone studied the technical readouts. Explain. Stellar igniters. Webb continued. Devices that can force premature stellar collapse. You place them inside stars and trigger controlled supernovas. The energy release would be thousands of times more powerful than anything the Devourers have encountered. How many stars are we talking about? Stone asked. Dozens, Webb replied. Maybe hundreds. We'd be turning entire star systems into weapons. Magnitude of what Webb was proposing struck Stone silent. They were talking about deliberately destroying stars. 8. Wiping out entire systems to create weapons powerful enough to kill the Devourers. It was a plan that would require sacrificing uninhabited systems to save the inhabited ones. The other species would never agree to it, Lieutenant Park said. The environmental impact alone would be catastrophic. They don't have to agree, Stone replied. This is a human operation. We'll build the devices, we'll deploy them, and we'll take responsibility for the consequences. Word of Operation Prometheus spread quickly through human space. Within days, every major corporation and government facility was converting their production lines to build stellar igniters. The devices were massive, each one requiring the industrial output of an entire planet to construct. But humanity wasn't working alone. The alien species, grateful for the sacrifice at Keth, offered their own technologies to help. The Lumeri provided crystal matrices that could amplify the stellar collapse effects. The Vorth offered bioengineering expertise to create guidance, systems that could navigate inside stellar cores. The Keth shared their quantum computers to calculate precise detonation timing. Commodore Ross, promoted to admiral after his actions at Keth, found himself in command of the largest construction project in galactic history. Thousands of ships were ferrying materials and personnel to build the stellar igniters, while millions of workers across dozens of worlds labored around the clock to meet the impossible deadline. Admiral, his aide reported, the Lumeri Crystal. Ship Harmony is requesting permission to join the construction fleet. They want to help install the amplification matrices. Ross approved the request. The sight of alien vessels working alongside human ships had become common in recent weeks. Species that had been suspicious of each other for centuries were now sharing their most advanced technologies. The Devourer threat had accomplished what thousands of years of diplomacy could not. It had united the galaxy. But the Devourers weren't waiting for the construction to finish. Reports came in daily of more systems falling to the advancing creatures. The Vorth industrial worlds of Sigma Draconis were consumed in a matter of hours. The Keth research stations at Wolf 359 went silent after broadcasting desperate pleas for help. The creatures were adapting, learning from their defeat at Keth, and developing new feeding strategies. Sir, Communications Officer Martinez reported, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim. It's Captain Davis on the scout ship Pathfinder. The main screen showed Captain Davis, a weathered woman who had been conducting reconnaissance missions deep in Devourer-controlled space. Her ship looked damaged, and her crew appeared exhausted. Admiral Ross Davis said, I've got bad news. The Devourers aren't just random raiders. They're organized. I've observed them communicating with each other, coordinating their movements. And, sir, they're building something. What kind of something? Ross asked. A structure around the galactic core. It's enormous, bigger than anything we've ever seen. If I had to guess, I'd say they're preparing to consume the central black hole. Ross felt his blood turn cold. If the Devourers succeeded in building a device that could consume the galactic core, no amount of stellar igniters would be able to stop them. The entire galaxy would be destroyed. How long do we have? Ross asked. Based on their construction rate, maybe 3 weeks, Davis replied. After that, the gravitational effects will start tearing apart the outer systems. Ross closed the communication and turned to his staff. 3 weeks to complete the most ambitious weapons project in history, deploy them across the galaxy, and coordinate the largest military operation ever attempted. It should have been impossible, but Ross had learned something at Keth. Humans specialized in doing impossible things. Send word to Admiral Stone, Ross ordered. Tell him we're accelerating the timeline. Okay. Operation Prometheus goes live in 2 weeks, ready or not. Across human space, the response was immediate. Work crews began laboring around the clock, with volunteers working shifts that would have killed them under normal circumstances. Mining ships stripped entire asteroid belts to provide raw materials. Corporate executives liquidated their companies to fund the war effort. Civilian volunteers left their families to join construction crews in the most dangerous regions of space. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity transformed its entire civilization into a weapons factory. Species that had once looked down on humans as primitive newcomers now spoke of them with reverence. The sight of human mothers sending their children to work on stellar igniters. Of elderly humans volunteering for missions they knew they wouldn't survive, became legend throughout the galaxy, but the most remarkable thing was the unity it created. The Devourers had tried to consume the galaxy, but instead they had forged it into something stronger than it had ever been. Every species worked together, sharing knowledge and resources, united by the example of human sacrifice and determination. As the stellar igniters neared completion, Admiral Ross stood on the observation deck of his flagship and looked out at the construction sites scattered across the system. Thousands of ships from dozens of species worked together building weapons that would literally set the stars on fire. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, Sir Lieutenant Bell reported. The first batch of stellar igniters is ready for deployment. Where do you want them placed? Ross studied the tactical display showing the Devourer advance. The creatures were moving in predictable patterns, following the richest sources of matter toward the galactic core. If the stellar igniters were placed correctly, they could create a chain reaction of supernovas that would destroy the entire Devourer fleet. Deploy them along the main invasion routes, Ross ordered, and prepare the fleet for the final battle. We're going to light up the galaxy. The final battle began at the heart of the galaxy, where space itself was torn and twisted by the massive gravitational forces of the central black hole. The Devourers had built a structure around the galactic core that defied comprehension, a web of biomechanical constructs stretching across millions of kilometers, all designed to channel matter directly into their feeding mechanisms. Admiral Ross stood on the bridge of his new flagship, Phoenix, a vessel built from the wreckage of the ships destroyed at Keth and crewed by volunteers from every species in the galaxy. Through the main screen, he could see the Devourer megastructure slowly consuming the matter that held the galaxy together. If they succeeded, the gravitational collapse would destroy every star system within 1,000 light-years. Admiral reported his tactical officer, a Lumari named Crystal Songa Morning. We count over 3,000 Devourer vessels of various sizes. They've linked their feeding systems together. The energy readings are off our instruments. Ross nodded grimly. The final Devourer fleet was larger than anything they had faced before. Each of the massive creatures was the size of a small moon, and they had positioned themselves in a defensive formation that would be impossible to break through conventional means, but Ross wasn't planning to fight conventionally. Status of the stellar igniters? Ross asked. 47 devices successfully deployed and armed, replied his engineering officer, a Vorth-named clicking of metal on stone, all positioned along the calculated detonation sequence. When activated, they will create a chain reaction of supernovas extending from here to the outer rim. Ross looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the stellar igniters. Each device was hidden inside a star system along the Devourer's supply routes. When activated simultaneously, they would create a wave of stellar explosions that would sweep through the galaxy like wildfire. The energy release would be greater than anything the universe had seen since the Big Bang itself. "Sir," Communications Officer Martinez reported, "we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. It's coming from the Devourer megastructure." "Put it through," Ross ordered. The main screen filled with an image that hurt to look at directly. The Devourer communication system created visual patterns that seemed to twist reality itself. It spoke. The voice came from everywhere at once, as if the fabric of space was vibrating with its words. "We are the Devourers," the voice said in perfect galactic standard. "We have consumed 1,000 galaxies across eternity. We are inevitable. We are infinite. Your resistance is noted but irrelevant." Ross stepped forward, addressing the alien intelligence directly. "This is Admiral Ross of the human fleet. We've got a message for you too. No, some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. You would sacrifice your own galaxy to oppose us," the Devourer asked. "Your stellar weapons will destroy countless." "Worlds, better to die free than live as food," Ross replied. "That's something you'll never understand." The communication cut off, and the Devourer fleet began moving toward the Allied forces. But Ross had expected this. The creatures thought they understood human tactics after the battle at Keith, but they were about to learn that humans always had another plan. "All ships," Ross broadcast to the combined fleet. "Operation Starfire is now active. Phase 1, execute." The first wave of stellar igniters activated simultaneously across the galaxy. 47 stars collapsed into supernovas in perfect synchronization, creating a wall of destruction that swept toward the galactic core at the speed of light. The energy release was so massive it could be seen from neighboring galaxies. The Devourers in the outer systems didn't even have time to react. The supernova wave struck their feeding fleets like a cosmic tsunami, vaporizing creatures that had survived for millions of years. But the ones at the galactic core were protected by their megastructure, which began absorbing the energy from the stellar explosions. "They're feeding on the supernovas," Crystal's Song of Morning reported in shock. "The energy is making them stronger." Ross had anticipated this too. Stellar igniters weren't just weapons, they were bait. The Devourer's greatest strength, their ability to consume energy, was about to become their weakness. "Phase 2, Ross ordered. "All ships, final approach." The combined fleet began its last advance toward the Devourer megastructure. Ships from every species in the galaxy flew together in perfect formation. Human cargo haulers flew alongside Lemuri crystal ships. Vorth biovessels moved in harmony with Keth quantum fighters. It was the most beautiful and terrible sight in galactic history. But Ross wasn't planning to engage the Devourers in conventional battle. As the fleet approached the megastructure, he gave the order that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. "Activate the stellar igniters inside the galactic core," Ross commanded. His crew stared at him in shock. The galactic core contained dozens of massive stars packed close together. If they all went supernova simultaneously, the energy release would create a black hole so large it would consume half the galaxy. "Sir," Clicking of Metal on Stone said, "that will destroy everything within 10,000 light years. Billions of star systems will be lost. And if we don't do it, the entire galaxy dies anyway," Ross replied. "Sometimes you have to burn down the forest to stop the fire from spreading." The stellar igniters at the galactic core activated, and reality itself seemed to scream. A dozen massive stars collapsed simultaneously, their combined energy output exceeding the total power of galactic civilization for 1,000,000 years. The resulting explosion created a zone of pure energy so intense that space and time began to break down. The Devourer megastructure, which had been feeding on the energy from the previous supernovas, couldn't process the massive influx of power from the galactic core explosions. The creatures' feeding mechanisms overloaded. Their biomechanical systems began failing, and their ancient intelligence started to fracture under the strain. Impossible, the Devourer voice broadcast across all frequencies, now distorted and breaking apart. Energy levels exceed consumption parameters. System failure cascading. This outcome was not calculated. That's because you never understood what drives us, Ross replied, watching as the Devourer megastructure began tearing itself apart. We don't fight because we think we'll win. We fight because some things are worth dying for. The final explosion, when it came, was visible from the edge of the galaxy, the combined energy from the stellar igniters and the collapsing Devourer megastructure created a burst of light so bright it outshone every star in the galaxy for several minutes. When the light faded, the Devourer fleet was gone, our ancient forms scattered as atoms across the cosmic wind. But the cost had been enormous. The explosions at the galactic core had destabilized space-time itself, creating a zone of destruction. That would take millions of years to heal. Thousands of star systems had been lost. The galaxy would never look the same. Ross stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, watching as the energy storms slowly faded. Around him, his crew, humans, Lumar, Vorth, Keth, and dozens of other species worked together to coordinate rescue operations and assess the damage. Sir Martinez reported, "We're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Devourer fleets everywhere have stopped moving. It looks like destroying the central intelligence caused a complete system shutdown." Ross nodded. The war was over, but the galaxy had paid a price that would be remembered for millions of years. Entire civilizations had been lost, billions of beings had died, and the very structure of the galaxy had been permanently altered. Admiral Crystal Song Vamorni said, "The other species are asking what happens now. The galaxy is in ruins. It will take centuries to rebuild." Ross looked at the tactical display showing the damage. The galactic core was a zone of twisted space-time that would be uninhabitable for eons. Entire spiral arms had been destabilized by the stellar explosions. The beautiful galaxy they had fought to save was gone, replaced by something scarred, but still alive. "We rebuild," Ross said simply. "Together." The Devourers thought they could consume us, but they just made us stronger. Every species in this galaxy fought side by side, shared their technology, sacrificed for each other. That's not something you can destroy with any weapon. As the rescue operations continued and the long work of rebuilding began, the story of humanity's sacrifice spread throughout the galaxy. The sight of human ships diving into stellar fires, of humans willing to destroy their own galaxy rather than see it enslaved, became the foundation of a new galactic civilization. The peace that followed would last for 1,000 generations. Built on the understanding that some things transcended species boundaries, stars themselves bore witness to what had happened, glowing brighter in the aftermath of humanity's fire. And in the end, that fire had not only saved the galaxy, it had transformed it into something better than it had ever been before. The Devourers were gone, but their legacy lived on in the unity they had inadvertently created. Humanity had answered one simple SOS call, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to fight for others. The stars would remember that lesson forever.